Have you ever said yes while your soul whispered a desperate no? Have you worn a smile like armor, not because you're at peace, but because you fear what would happen if you weren't? There's a kind of suffering that leaves no scars. It doesn't cry out, it doesn't collapse, it simply settles, like fog in the corners of your mind, softly smothering the parts of you that once burned bright. You go through the motions, you play your part, you bend, adjust, smile. Because that's what's expected, because that's what's safe. But somewhere beneath the surface, something begins to fade. Not with noise, but with stillness. Not with violence, but with forgetting. You forget how it feels to want, to choose, to take up space without apology, to exist without editing yourself for comfort. Instead, you shrink, not out of humility, but out of fear. Fear of being too much. Fear of being not enough. Fear that love is conditional and your truth too costly. So you disappear, not all at once, just little by little, until your reflection feels foreign, until the smile you wear no longer feels like yours. This isn't burnout. This is a quiet burial of the self you once knew. Because not all pain screams, some of it waits. It waits in silence. Until one day something inside you finally asks, whose life am I performing? And when did I stop living mine? Because if your truth isn't welcome in your own life, then maybe you haven't been living at all. Just surviving, just acting, until you choose finally to wake up. Are you ready? At first, the mask feels harmless, like a costume you put on for the world, a voice you borrow, a smile you rehearse, a role you step into. You tell yourself it's just for now, just to keep things smooth, just to be liked, to avoid friction, to belong. But over time, something shifts. You stop remembering where the mask ends and where you begin. You act like you're fine, even when something inside is unraveling. You laugh when you're aching. You say yes when your soul says no. You become who they expect. And slowly, who you are begins to fade. Not in some dramatic collapse, but in the quietest ways. You forget what you like. You hesitate before speaking, unsure if the words are truly yours. You second-guess your instincts because they don't match the part you've been playing. And still, on the outside, everything appears intact. People call you dependable, calm, easy to be around, but inside, you're disappearing. And no one notices, because you've taught them not to. Each time you silence yourself to be accepted, you abandon something sacred. A feeling, a boundary, a truth. And the cost is heavy, not loud, but constant. A dull anxiety that hums beneath your days. A fog around who you are. A sadness with no clear name. This isn't just exhaustion. This is self-erasure, dressed up as harmony. You've learned to wear the mask so well, you no longer know how to take it off. And somewhere in that silence, a deeper question forms. If the mask has become your skin, who's left beneath it? At some point, you begin to feel it. Not a breakdown, not a dramatic collapse, just a quiet misalignment, like something inside you is slightly out of tune. You're functioning, smiling, doing what's expected. But beneath that smooth exterior, another part of you is stirring, restless, unseen, unmet. This is the beginning of the war, not between you and the world, but between two forces within you. The ego, which seeks control, safety, recognition, and the unconscious, which wants truth. The ego whispers, "Stay polished, stay agreeable, don't shake the image." But the unconscious does not whisper. It speaks in symptoms. You feel tired, though you've rested. Anxious, though there's nothing wrong. Irritated, even with people you love. You laugh, but it feels disconnected. You cry and don't know why. These are not random moods, they're messages. Signals from the part of you you've silenced too long. Carl Jung said that when the ego strays too far from the whole self, the unconscious begins to compensate. Not with logic, but with dreams, emotions, physical sensations. You try to hold it all together, but something inside you keeps unraveling. And the more you cling to the mask, the louder the rebellion becomes. Your body tightens, your sleep breaks, your decisions feel hollow. You're living on the surface of yourself, and the depths are beginning to flood. This inner war isn't meant to destroy you. It's meant to awaken you, to remind you there's a part of you that cannot be negotiated, edited, or ignored. A part that doesn't want approval, only truth. And the question that arises now is not how do I stay afloat? It's what happens if I finally stop pretending? Not all personalities carry the same weight when it comes to pleasing others. Some of us, almost without noticing, are shaped around the need to be needed. Jung called it the extroverted feeling type. But you don't need to know the name to recognize the experience. You walk into a room and immediately feel the temperature of the people around you. You sense what they want, what they expect, what will make them comfortable. And you shift, effortlessly, unconsciously, until you match it. You read the energy like a second language, but you forget to read yourself. To others, you're kind, compassionate, the peacemaker, the helper, the good one. But inside, there's a quiet cost. You lose your center, because your compass is always pointing outward, searching for signs of approval. You confuse love with usefulness, and when you're not being helpful, you feel invisible. You don't ask, what do I want? You ask, what do they need from me? Who do they want me to be? And in this constant calibration, your truth goes missing. You nod during conversations that don't reflect your beliefs. You stay in places that drain you, because leaving might disappoint. You swallow your discomfort even when it's begging to be heard. And worst of all, you don't realize it's happening, because it feels normal, familiar, safe. But that safety is an illusion, because beneath the image of harmony, you're quietly vanishing. And while this pattern is strongest in the phi type, you don't need that label for it to be real. Anyone who's ever chosen acceptance over authenticity, anyone who's feared rejection more than self-abandonment, anyone who's smiled while their soul went silent, has touched this wound. And once you feel it, you can't unfeel it. But that's not a curse. It's the beginning of awareness. Because only when you recognize the pattern can you begin the return to yourself. When the truth is ignored long enough, it doesn't disappear. It descends into the body, into your sleep, into the places you thought were safe from feeling. The unconscious does not speak in plain language. It doesn't write you letters or speak in logic. It whispers in images. It trembles through emotion. And when ignored too long, it erupts. You dream of being chased because something inside you is running from itself. You try to scream in the dream, but no sound comes out, a symbol of how often you silence yourself. You're trapped, cornered, naked in public. These aren't just random scenes, they are psychic metaphors, reflections of the soul's entrapment in a life that no longer fits. But the signs don't end when you wake up. The body starts to speak. You feel tired, even when you've rested. You lie awake at night, eyes open in the dark, as if some part of you is wide awake and waiting. Your breath shortens in public. Your chest tightens in conversations that ask too much. And the world tells you it's stress. But the truth, it's the unconscious, rising to the surface. And when even the body can't get your attention, it turns to compulsion. You scroll endlessly. You overeat, overspend, overwork, not out of indulgence, but to avoid silence. Because in the silence, something speaks, something you've buried, and it's painful to hear. Painful to admit that your life may have been built around avoidance. Painful to feel how long you've ignored yourself. But ignoring these signals won't make them disappear. They will only grow louder until they break something. This is not punishment, It's a rescue mission. The unconscious is not your enemy. It's the forgotten part of you that refuses to be forgotten. And every dream, every symptom, every strange ache is its way of saying, come back. Come back to what's real. Come back to yourself. There comes a moment, subtle but undeniable, when the cost of performing becomes too high. You realize you've been living for appearances but dying by degrees. And in that moment, a deeper path begins to call. Jung called it individuation. Not a luxury, not a concept, but a psychic necessity. It is the process of becoming whole, of reclaiming the parts of yourself you silenced to survive, the parts you were told were too much, too selfish, too inconvenient. It's not about throwing away the persona. You still need it. We all do, but it's about no longer confusing the mask with your face. Individuation asks more of you than fitting in ever did. It asks you to face your shadow, the parts of you you've disowned, your anger, your envy, your hunger for truth. It asks you to disappoint others, to say no when you've been the yes person your whole life, to lose validation, and keep walking anyway. It asks you to stop borrowing your identity from others' approval and build something real within. And it's not easy. You may feel lost, alone. You may grieve the version of you that was easy to love because it wasn't real. But the reward is nothing short of coming back to life. You begin to move in alignment, not with what's expected, but with what is true. And for the first time in a long time, you breathe fully. You feel clear. You hear your own voice, and it doesn't tremble. This is not perfection, this is coherence. And it's from this deep coherence that peace is born. Not the peace of pleasing, but the peace of finally, fully being. So what happens when the mask finally slips? When you stop apologizing for your truth and start building your life around it? At first, it's disorienting, like waking up in a room you've lived in your whole life, but seeing it for the very first time. You may lose things, comfort, approval. Some people will step back, not because you've changed too much, but because you've stopped pretending. But what you gain is something far deeper. You gain yourself, your voice, unfiltered, your clarity no longer borrowed, your boundaries no longer blurred. A connection to something that comes from within and doesn't ask for permission to exist. This is what it means to live from your center, not from the roles, not from the expectations, not from the fear of being unloved, but from a quiet place inside that knows, I am allowed to take up space, even if it makes others uncomfortable, even if I have to walk alone. The journey is not easy, it's raw, it's unglamorous, but it's real, and when the noise settles, when the dust of other people's projections clears, you find something still standing. You. No diversion, not a role. You. So if something in you stirred while listening, don't let it sink back into silence. Speak it, write it, share it below. Not for visibility, but as a quiet commitment to yourself. Because once the awakening begins, there is no going back to sleep. There's only forward, deeper, truer. And that path is yours now. The journey inward is not comfortable. It will ask more of you than the world ever did. It will ask you to unlearn, to unravel, to face truths you spent years avoiding. But freedom does not come from comfort. It comes from alignment, from living in a way that no longer fractures your soul. The truth is not always gentle. It doesn't flatter, but it frees. And once it enters you, you can't unknow it. You can resist. You can retreat, but the quiet knowing remains, waiting, watching, whispering. You were never meant to disappear to be loved. So keep going, not faster, not harder, but deeper. And when it gets quiet enough, you'll begin to hear your own voice again, not the one shaped by fear or expectation, but the one that was always yours. That voice is where freedom begins. And the rest of the path? You'll find it by walking. If something in this video resonated with you, leave a comment, a like, or subscribe. Not for show, but as a quiet reminder that you're already on the path back to yourself. See you in the next video.